Hi, everybody, and welcome to the January 8th, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. We're back from our holiday hiatus, looking forward to a great year. Let's get a quick take on the loss felt across Colorado this week with the passing of renowned news columnist Penny Parker. Penny Calhoun from Westward, you are a longtime friend of Penny's. When the announcement came out the weekend, it was really an explosion on social media. People all throughout the community all have some sort of connection to Penny. What's been some of the thoughts you've heard so far?
Well, it was a sad start to the new year for sure when the news came out on Sunday night. One of the interesting things about Penny is she was a really old school journalist. When she first moved here 20 years ago, there was no one more competitive. In fact, Lynn Bartles has a great story about how the Rocky Mountain News would always talk about, they called her Penny, as first seen in the Denver Post, Parker, because she was always beating the news on the beat she covered. Then when she became a citywide columnist, she really kind of debuted social media. She really used social media in a way many people hadn't used it before. And now we're seeing it come back because even later off years ago, the amount of comment and people who care about her and want to follow her is incredible. So some of her friends are planning to have a public memorial where we'll read parts of her columns, both that skewered and loved people. John Elway sent out a tweet about Penny Parker. She made a great impact on this community, so we'll be posting it on her memorial page when that is, probably later in the month.
Well, I know people will be looking very forward to seeing that. Mike Krause, the Independence Institute, thank you for joining us. You know, beyond just my personal feelings of really enjoying Penny Parker and what she wrote, it reminded me kind of, I guess, our good old days of a two-newspaper town and what that meant to have this kind of personality involved. What do you think?
Absolutely. Well, first, as I've been experiencing, the older and older I become, the younger and younger 62 sound. So it really seems a shame to have lost Penny at that young age when she should still have had a lot of time to continue writing and doing whatever she would be doing post journalism. But yes, it's also part of there's an ongoing loss in Denver of institutional knowledge of back in the day when we were a two-newspaper town. So you've seen a lot of people from the Rocky, and then as the Post has shed employees, a lot of longtime voices who have moved on to other things or left the state or are no longer active in the industry. So you're really seeing kind of there's an era diminishing that there's less and less knowledge of the fact that we used to be this two-paper town and that it was more of a cow town, certainly, and so things change, but it's also a shame to lose that institutional kind of memory and knowledge.
Absolutely. Eric Sonneman, political analyst. With your background, including a variety of media and public relations consulting, you could really appreciate the kind of impact somebody like Penny Parker had in Denver.
Absolutely. Very sad. The phrase that comes to my mind is simply self-made. She made herself. She took a beat, which is an interesting beat, but she made it a sensation. I can't tell you the number of lunches or coffees or beers I've had around over the years where someone would stop. Fortunately, it wasn't me, but when someone would stop mid-conversation because I have to text Penny of something they just witnessed. But let me just go bigger real quickly than Penny. Very sad to lose her. But at the start of this year, we lost a number of other prominent personalities around this town and this state as well. I'm thinking of Bill Koska, who for a generation, probably the generation ahead of mine, defined what public relations was in Denver. Emma Salazar, mother of that whole clan, including Ken Salazar and John Salazar, and going way, way back, Vern Rapp. It's a name some people might not recognize, but he was a longtime manager of the Denver Bears that preceded the Rockies. So it's been a rough week for some Denver and Colorado institutions.
Absolutely. Rounding out the panel, Natasha Gardner, senior editor of 5280 magazine. 5280 is another one that's a magazine that's really become a bastion of everything Colorado, but especially looking at kind of the social scene. So seeing some of the work that Penny did, you could certainly appreciate what this made the scene here in Denver be like.
Absolutely, and I think that's an important connection to make, and what certainly for me, when I moved to Colorado, Penny was immediately a must-read column for many reasons, just places, people, things that were happening, but how they were connected. She was not only creating an encyclopedia of the city, but really defining how some of that came together, and that mark isn't going to disappear with her passing. And fortunately, it was something I was able to experience firsthand, but she is part of a legacy of journalism journalism in this city that certainly has set the bar. And it's something that I aspire to. I hope other journalists in the city look at and see this is something that we have to continue no matter what that looks like.
Colorado State Representative Rhonda Fields was among a select group of lawmakers on hand when President Obama announced several executive actions addressing gun control this week. Included in the White House plans are a rule addressing background checks, funding for new ATF agents, and a proposal investing $500 million to mental health care access. Patty, this made huge headlines throughout the nation this week, and Representative Rhonda Fields, who plays a big role on that issue here in Colorado, also played on the national stage. What did you think?
Well, it actually looked like Obama was playing off Colorado's playbook because what he came down with in the executive order was very much what Colorado has already done, although not going quite as far. She, of course, wasn't the only Coloradan in the audience. We had the people who were the two legislators who were recalled there because for whatever reason, whether it was because they didn't respond to their constituents or simply because they had pushed gun legislation, they lost their seats. I'm sorry to say that one other legislator wasn't there, Jerry Sonnenberg, who came up with the incredible analogy of equating Obama's tears to oiling an assault weapon that's going to kill 6 and 7-year-olds. We should not just have permits and licenses for guns. We should have them for legislators before they tweet. Are you kidding me to be that cynical about it? The suggestion that Obama, who has overseen horror after horror. I mean, you can talk to John Hickenlooper about what it's like to preside over funeral services and have to talk about multiple murders by guns. Maybe these stopgap measures wouldn't have prevented that, but if they prevent any, good.
It's nice at least to be able to see a safety mechanism on a Twitter feed for a legislator. I would definitely support that. Mike, these executive actions aren't new laws. I mean, there's differences there, but when it comes to just a public point of view, it seems like it's almost a late Christmas gift for Republicans looking to fundraise 2016. Does it go beyond that for Republicans when you look at these issues?
I think it should be very good for fundraising for Second Amendment advocacy groups. And might be good for Republicans, but let's back over. Well, first off, Representative Field was clearly not a political prop for this thing. She actually has a very compelling and personal backstory with regard to guns. Even though she is wrong on the policy end of it, she has a very tragic story to tell. So she's an ideal figure for this kind of event. That said, the Obama, I think the real impact of what he did was a masterful piece of political theater, because all he had to do was suggest that he was going to take a unilateral executive action on guns, and he fired up the gun control base and the progressive base, tied Republicans up in knots over how to respond to this, fired up gunnies, maybe inadvertently, but that was just fallout from it. But at the end of the day, after all the sound and fury, he did remarkably little. I mean, some of these executive actions were merely suggestions. Some, like expanding personnel expanded personnel, are just to make sure that the existing background check laws are done in a timely and thorough manner, which is the least we should expect from our government in the first place. So what he really did was take over the news cycle for a week, and everything else went off. ISIS? I haven't heard a word about ISIS in a week. So it was a brilliant piece of theater that at the end of the day accomplishes very little in terms of actual new law or regulation for gun control.
Eric, Mike raises a good point. I mean, it took a lot to knock Donald Trump off the headlines for a week, but this really certainly did it. Do you think this will have impact on the election, whether it be Hillary Clinton or the Republican candidates or even down-ticket races?
Surely. I mean, guns are a dividing line issue between the two parties in this country, and both of them appeal very strongly to their respective bases. I think Mike is right in the sense of this was much ado about not all that much. The substance of these executive orders was very, very modest. I struggle with this issue. On the one hand, I'm anything but a Second Amendment absolutist. Whether it's the Colorado laws or the substance of this executive orders, I have no problem with them on substance. I do think something that is missed in this dialogue is the notion of process. And there is increasingly an ethic in this country on both sides of the political aisle that all ends justify all means. And we have seen out of this president, as well as previous presidents, but it's been intensified under this president, and particularly in this final months and years of his term, a proclivity to use executive orders, where even in years past he said he couldn't do that because this was subject to congressional action. There is an increasing consolidation of power in this country in the executive and away from the legislature, and no matter how dysfunctional Congress might be, and no matter how much people might despise or dislike Congress, they still are the elected legislative branch of this government. So I think the net effect of all this is to increase polarization in this country, to decrease any sense or any hope of good faith or collaboration. And don't forget, lastly, that one day there's going to be a Republican sitting in the Oval Office, whether that's 12 months from now or 4 or 5 years from now or 9, 10 years from now. The pendulum does swing in this country. And not only can that Republican, obviously with the stroke of a pen, undo these executive orders, but he or she can use that same kind of consolidated executive power in ways that current fans of these executive orders will find very frightening.
Natasha, this did seem, I felt a little bit about it, that Obama understood that his legacy is now becoming a bigger deal for him to do. You only have a few months left, and really the election's going to begin to really eat at all the attention. So there's only a few months left to do something, and this seemed like a big issue to do something about it. Does this speak to his legacy? Was there enough there to do that?
I think the speech was entirely about his legacy. Interestingly enough, too, in the speech he referred to the Affordable Care Act as Obamacare as well. So two items related to his legacy came out in that speech. You know, talking about guns for me personally is so difficult. I mean, I basically grew up in ranch land USA. Everyone had guns. They used them for the most part overwhelmingly responsibly. They use them to hunt. They use them to feed their family with that food. They go through gun safety. I mean, everyone in high school went through gun safety. That's just how it is. But that's so I understand the right to bear arms and how important it is to protect that, and how people are really fighting in this country to do that for good reasons. However, I think Obama's speech also raised a great awareness of the rights that we're losing as a result of this too. And so taking the step back to say, all right, what are we giving up in the opportunity of keeping this right, and what does that mean for our future? And I think what was interesting to me, and we know Obama is a very good debater. He's a very good at the art of argument at a time in our country and in individual conversations we're not very good at it. He brought back the subtlety. Instead of a sledgehammer, it was more like a foam mallet of, all right, folks, we're going to talk about this, and this is going to be part of my legacy, and we are going to continue to have conversations. But nothing that he said was really revolutionary or so new that people who weren't already going to get upset about it, they were going to get upset about it. But it raised some conversational points for the rest of us to perhaps have conversations with perhaps some of the people that I grew up with about how do we do this? How does this look in Denver, Colorado, and New York, and in Chicago, and in North Dakota?
Governor John Hickenlooper is at odds with Republican State Senate President Bill Cadman over the complexities of the hospital provider fee battle. Cadman claims a memo from Legislative Legal Services affirms that the governor's proposal is unconstitutional. However, Hickenlooper refutes that the Attorney General's office has already commented that nothing in TABOR prohibits the proposal. Mike, the whole hospital provider fee thing is pretty complicated. I consider myself someone who at least keeps up with politics the best I can, and it confuses the heck out of me. So I don't want to get into too much of the details there. But when it comes to fighting, you get the Senate president on one side and the governor on one side. One says it's illegal, one says it's not legal. How bitter is that fight going to get?
It'll be interesting to see how bitter it gets to, and whether or not there's something introduced to try and meet in the middle to try and get around this. But let's just assume for a minute that, let's say for the sake of argument, that it is constitutional. It is still a very cynical shell game going on to try and bust TABOR and to basically deny TABOR refunds to people moving forward long-term into the future. The hospital provider fee is really a tax. The federal government even calls this a tax when they approved Colorado's participation in this. It was disingenuously called a fee to get around having to have people vote on it. You are taxing sick people in the hospital and then not allowing them to see that tax on their bill to shift money to another account to bring in federal matching funds to now subsidized care for healthy people through our Medicaid expansion, and then sending the money back over to the hospital. So if anyone else was doing this, we would probably call it some kind of Ponzi scheme, or they would be under some kind of criminal indictment for doing this in the private sector. So clearly this is a tax And clearly what they want to do is simply get around simply asking the voters, can we keep this money? Do you approve of this? So this has all been one big end run around the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And I applaud Senator Cadman for standing firm, because he's been under an immense amount of pressure by what we call the Takings Coalition, the people who want to take this money, move it out from under the TABOR limitations to spend on things. I think that the Democrats were wrong to pass this as a fee years ago. It's clearly a tax, should have been put to a vote of the people, and should be repealed, frankly.
Eric, as a political issue, is it more valuable for Governor Hickenlooper to see this enacted and that he kind of wins this issue, or is it more valuable for him to lose on this one and for it to become kind of a martyred example of the problems with Tabor, where he can fight a bigger battle?
It's a good question, Dominic. There are a whole lot of moving parts here, and this is one substantial moving part, but it's not the only one. And the bigger ones are the Better Colorado campaign that is coming up to detaborize the state, or at least to basically do a permanent referendum C, debruce the state through a permanent referendum C, which is going to be one of the battle royales in all likelihood of this coming fall. I think John Hickenlooper really sees the hospital provider fee not as a political issue, but as a way to leverage $750 million or something to use for highways, to use for higher education, to use for X, Y, and Z without having to refund that to taxpayers. It has become a game of political gotcha between the Senate Republicans they run that Senate by an 18-17 split, and the governor and other Democrats. And without even opining on where the equities lie, although there was a clear opinion the other day from Legislative Legal Services that basically supported the Republican position here, the Republicans think they have a trump card here in political terms. And there is a lot of talk I'm hearing these days of the Republicans, probably they can't get it through the legislature as a referred measure, but maybe even as an initiated measure, to take this to the voters for clarification. And if they win, well, fine, then Tabor has been reinforced. And if they lose, that's fine too. They at least have made the case and required the Democrats to adhere to their interpretation of Tabor. So this is one of many political games that is going to get played out over the coming 4 months of the legislative session. I can't tell you what the upshot of it's going to be.
Natasha, Tabor's been a point of contention for the legislature since it was passed way back in '92, so that's nothing new. But does this particular fight add anything new to the argument?
Well, if anything, it's turning Tabor into like one of those words you can't say on television, like the old Carlin sketch, right?
It will be on the show.
And I think that is the policy. I think that there's slowly, part of the PR agenda is to just take away people's trust and respect in what this is. And of course, I think we are going to see it on the ballot sooner rather than later. What I think is interesting about this, though, is that how quickly things change. When they first looked at putting this into place, the economic forecast in Colorado was dismal. We were not going to be looking at the situation that we are today, which is great economic forecast. I mean, take a look outside in downtown Denver and look at the cranes in the sky. Things are completely different. And that's part of the reason why we have to constantly tinker with our system. Whether you like Tabor or not, that forces us to constantly tinker with our system and look at what our budget priorities are. I don't want to call it a crisis yet, because I think we use that word maybe too often, but the budgetary concerns that are happening in the state and what we have to pay for and what we will not be able to pay for is going to be a big topic at this table and up at the Capitol as well this year.
Patty, even if the program is legal, if that's a full decision that does come out that way, it still has to go through the legislature to happen. Does Governor Hickenlooper have the political capital to make that work?
Well, he might. He's got to decide what political capital he wants to spend. Now, we have to remember, this wasn't his idea. This one dates back to Ritter. So it was a way, when the economy was going to hell, to just try to save, to capture some of the money that was coming in. You know, you have to think about Tabor and this city. Let me use this beautiful coffee cup. So all the money that's coming into the state, you know, it's going into the coffee cup, and Tabor has a limit on how much can come in. The hospital provider fee is basically on top of that. So what they're hoping to do is just use the fee, have a little spigot and let it out and use it for the things that Colorado would really like to pay for right now, like roads, which they can't do under the current budget with the Tabor limitations. And they thought they had a deal, the Democrats, and especially Hickenlooper, thought they had a deal with the Republicans that If the money went to transportation, went to fixing all those potholes, went to fixing those highways that no one's come up with a way to fix otherwise, then maybe the fee would pass. We'll see if people are upset enough about the roads to make it work and push it through in this legislative session, but there are a lot of other sticky issues that Hickenlooper's going to have to use his political capital on too.
Let's get a quick take on this last one. Building a Better Colorado Director Reeves Brown said the community meetings held in 2015 have shown considerable consensus on eliminating the budget caps of TABOR and making it more difficult to pass constitutional amendments. The organization seems to be close to announcing 3 ballot proposals for November's election. Eric, you know this issue pretty well. You know how difficult it is. Your quick take.
Tough one for a quick take, but I'll do it. 2 words. Heavy lift. This is going to be a very heavy lift to pass by the voters this November, but it seems that the establishment stars are aligned, including the governor, this effort led by Dan Ritchie, to make the effort. The public mood out there, witness Donald Trump, witness even Bernie Sanders on the left, is an angry public mood. It reminds me of the public mood somewhat back in 1992. What happened in 1992? Ross Perot was on the ballot as a mini version of Donald Trump, and TABOR passed into law. It is going to be a tough year to repeal it or to substantially modify it.
Natasha, what do you think? Are they lining themselves up for a fight that they can win?
I think it will be a very interesting battle, no matter what. I hesitate to make any predictions about this because I think it's a wild ride in the next few months here. But if I had to make one prediction, my prediction will be that the ballot will be very, very big. I hope we have postage costs to cover this. It is the mail-in ballot is going to be immense. So no matter whether they win or not, I don't think we know enough or yet to truly say. But there certainly will be a lot of issues, including these 2.
Patty, does this make fracking the lower tier battle on the upcoming election?
I think it'll still make fracking the big money one, but I think what Building a Better Colorado really has an uphill battle on is making it harder to get constitutional amendments on, because if the populace is upset about government, that's something they don't want to lose.
Mike, does this go anywhere without bipartisan support?
Well, no, and as we've seen a few Republicans sign on to it, former Republicans, no legislators have signed on to this idea yet. Building a Better Colorado is actually a bit of a misnomer. It should really be called Building a Bigger Colorado Government. Because what they originally said their plan was to look at some nuanced and subtle changes. Well, there's nothing nuanced or subtle about eliminating TABOR caps or changing the way citizens get to amend their own constitution. Those are significant issues. I think that this shows that in many ways this has been kabuki theater to try and get some public opinion around a preset outcome. And John Frank did an excellent piece in the Denver Post on this where Reeves Brown even acknowledged that this was kind of done in a bubble with no opposition, and they won't release their polling results or their methodology. So that gives, to me, that gives credence, and we're one of the organizations that looked at this and said this is the Destroy TABOR Committee. This is just a new iteration of an old formula to try and chip away at TABOR.
Let's get to our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. As always, Ms. Calhoun, please start us off.
Well, I would like to say it's David, much as I love Mike. I wore my gun, just my only gun, just for David, and he's not here. But instead, I am going to take on the federal government, which suddenly sprang on the city of Lakewood, putting 1,000 to 1,500 refugees, and we're not talking Syrian refugees, we're talking about the refugees from a year and a half ago when we were all talking about it. The kids from Central America who are fleeing oppression, who are coming here, we still don't have a solution for them, and the best thing we can do is lock them up in Lakewood. There's got to be a better solution.
Mike?
President Obama, for his unilateral and executive actions this week, as candidate Obama, he actually inferred that President Bush had taken too much power into the executive and had been making decisions that bypassed Congress, and said that he would change that as president. Well, as president, he has embraced the idea of imperial rule through executive action, an odd understanding of the actual structure of the American government for a guy who claims to be a constitutional law professor.
Eric?
The Colorado caucus system, we are about to embark. The Iowa caucuses and then the New Hampshire primary and everything are a month away. Colorado is at the epicenter of this presidential race in November, and we are nowhere to be found in terms of the Republican nomination contest or the Democratic nomination contest, because we insist on holding on to this archaic, antiquated system that discourages participation. The Republicans have gone so far this year as not to even have a preference poll. We have made ourselves complete non-players in this nominating process on both sides of the aisle.
Natasha.
I'm going to switch to entertainment, although politics can be plenty entertaining, and join the hashtag Where's Rey from the Star Wars movie. She's the notable female character. She has been absent in some key promotional and merchandising efforts, including the Monopoly game, which makes no sense because she's a pivotal...
She's not a Monopoly game? That's crazy.
She's a pivotal character. I won't give away any spoilers. However, as a female person in a film, she's also a great model for our kids. So not to have that in that effort to market and promote the film is just really sad. And the idea of female action figures, I just want to point out, I would love to see a Molly Brown action figure. Just putting that into the universe.
That would be awesome. Well, to do this part quickly, say something nice about somebody. Patty.
Stock show's in town and breathing a sigh of relief this year because it's got a big boatload of money coming in. So everyone should be paying attention where that money's going.
Mike.
Senate President Bill Cadman, a guy who was under an enormous amount of pressure over the last couple months to sign on to this TABOR busting shell game of a hospital provider fee, and he has stood firm. Good for him.
Eric.
My wife Tracy has 2 students here today with her from the Logan School, Andrew Poole and Leica Masudi. So a shout out to Andrew and Leica, and I hope they're enjoying watching this production.
You're here. Natasha.
Last month, ProPublica published The Unbelievable Story of Rape. It is a fantastic piece of journalism, but it also features a Colorado angle and some efforts by some local law enforcement who did incredible work. It's a good read.
Fantastic. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. As always, remember to check out the CIO podcast on iTunes and our web-exclusive segments on our Twitter feed. Also, don't miss the premiere of the last season of Downton Abbey, broadcasting next Monday night at 8 p.m. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.
My name's Chris Missling, and I do the master control here at Channel 12. I run all the records and tapes for CIO, and I make sure that we're doing our closed captioning and streaming to the web. I always check the slate and make sure it matches the day and episode that we're taping for that day. This is our multi-viewer where I can watch the studio feed plus all of my recorders, and I can just watch all my different feeds all at once, plus the live signal which is going out over the air, which I'm also responsible for. They won't start until I'm rolling.
Thank you, Master Control.
Now we're in the show, and I'm just checking up there to make sure all my recorders are good and that everything looks good. I'm watching my live streaming here. There's going to be a delay, but it looks like it's working.
Hi, I'm Steven, and I'm here behind the scenes for CIO Friday. We are in the server room right now. This is the heartbeat. I don't know if you can hear it. You hear it? No? Okay. If anyone told you that they have the magic, they were wrong. This is where the magic is at, especially Dominic. If he said magic anywhere in his interview thing, that was wrong. Magic is here. So, when Chris, our master control operator, which you just saw, hits record on his computer, the software sends a signal to our video server. This is our video server here. These blues are sexy. So that's how he records our shows here. That's how they record shows coming down from the satellites that they air later. And this is also where CIO plays out when we broadcast it. The other piece of equipment in here that is part of CIO is our switcher. This is our mainframe for the switcher. And if we look behind the switcher, you'll see the cables that feed it. These are all the camera cables down here that feed the switcher. So when the technical director, which was Tyler in our other episode, is hitting buttons, it's communicating to the mainframe and connecting one cable. Like if this was camera 1, it says route camera 1 through all the effects and then go out a different cable that then goes into our Omnion, which is the video server that we just saw. This is our air conditioning units, and I just come in and I just like stay here. I just do this for hours. I actually hug it. It's nice. But only I do that. No one else does that. Don't tell anybody. I shouldn't have done that. Don't put that on camera. This is what we call the blinky light room. If you watch these lights right here, these will start talking to us. You can find the answers to everything in the universe here, but you can't take it out of the room. It's weird. It's frustrating. We have air coming down out of the room that erases your memory.
Welcome to the January 8th, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on a 9 News report from late last year showing that a considerable amount of the funds used in the recall effort against 3 conservative Jeffco school board members was directly provided by teachers unions in Colorado. Patty Cahoon from Westward. For the cynics around this table, this probably wasn't terribly surprising to see his report, but from the investigations that 9 News had to do, it didn't come until late December. What was your reaction?
Well, and let's be clear, from a considerable amount, we're really talking about almost the entire fund minus one kid's allowance, probably. So it took a lot of records, open records requests, but they found out what we basically confirmed suspicions. But money didn't necessarily make the difference here. We have to remember a year ago when we were voting on the education fund in Colorado, there was huge amounts of money for that education proposal, and it sank and sank fast. So in this case, we don't know what would have happened with that recall without the money, but it certainly helped.
Mike Krause from the Independence Institute. This is probably an issue we have to explain to you because you don't know anything really about when it comes to school unions and fights. I'm obviously teasing. The Independence Institute was directly involved in the battle. What was your reaction and then also your feedback from being a part of really in the trenches in this battle?
We're gratified that that the truth came out, even though it was after the fact. We knew this long ago before signatures were even gathered, and so did a lot of people, political insiders who were looking at this really difficult. And the proponents of the recall adamantly denied union involvement. The union adamantly denied involvement in the campaign. In fact, it was a parent-led, Jeffco-led, and we knew that not to be true, but there's just no way to prove it. Complete Colorado broke the original story about the NEA funding through the NEA's own disclosures for their political giving for last year. And then, of course, the Jeffco United was found to have violated Colorado campaign finance law and was forced to disclose its donors. And that's when 9 News did a really excellent piece, by the way, looking at this. And interestingly enough, there were actually people on the campaign who were calling for reporters to be fired at 9 News for suggesting just suggesting that there might be union involvement in this campaign. And so 9 News really did an excellent job even taking the time to hold off on the piece till after the holidays to make sure it got good viewership, because I'm sure they felt like they were, frankly, lied to. When they asked directly, is there union involvement in this, and told no. So we knew this all along, and I think that what's really going to come of this is that moving forward, if you see a recall like this in the future in another school district, it will be assumed that it's union-led. And by the way, it was union-led. It was a union-led recall. We should just call it that.
Eric Sonderman, political analyst. I'd like to take a point that Mike just made, that the next time we have, because there's always going to be a next time when it comes to union and non-union battles when it comes to education, is it going to be much harder for it to sound like teachers and parents and kids making this a grassroots effort when it's really just going to be two juggernauts like as it's always been.
And as you point out, there's always going to be a next time for these battles. And unfortunately in Colorado, there's also always going to be a next time with regard to recalls, because we've now unsheathed that weapon, and both the left and right are embracing it and using it with too much frequency. To Patty's point, I think Patty is right that we don't know if the recall would have been successful even without this huge money. But I guess I'd have 2 asterisks to that. One is, would it have even started in the first place without knowing that the war chest was there? And there was plenty of uproar among parents out there. They may have had 50% plus one of the votes even without the union money. My question is whether it would have happened and how the case would have been prosecuted without all the union money. None of us are shocked that the unions funded 99% of this effort. What bothers me, and Mike pointed this out, were the denials, let's call it what it was, the bald-faced lies throughout the campaign that this was going on. They were within their rights to put up whatever money they want, whether it was NEA, CEA, Jefferson County Education Association, but let's at least be a little upfront, a little bit candid, a little less cynical, a little less duplicitous about owning your actions.
Natasha Gardner, senior editor of 5288 magazine. This is great fodder for us at a table like this. We talk about these issues. We were not shocked. We all had faint, what surprises. But when it comes to the public, does this have a long memory? Do people remember this next time? Or is there going to be an effort needed to remind folks, or will folks really even care?
I don't think we're going to need an effort to remind, because I think we've turned a corner with school board elections. They are no longer off the table. I mean, they've always been contentious, sort of in one-off scenarios, or if it was a particularly important, political year, sure. And there are certain, campaign finance rules and things like that change those elections. But those elections from now on are going to be very, very interesting to people who want to put big money into elections. Some of that's surprising to me. I mean, school board has always been a starting point for politicians. It's a good place to get your feet wet, see where your base is, see what your policies are, see how you can raise money. And now we're just going to move that up a little bit. So even if people aren't aware of it, I think it's going to be straight in their face. And this is the time for us to take a look and say, all right, how do we make this as transparent as possible? What kind of rules and regulations do we need to put in place to make sure that these elections focus on what they're supposed to be about, which is the schools and the kids?
Maybe I'm showing my cynical side, but the election being about the schools and the kids maybe a little bit further down the road than we would like to see. That is all the time we have for Colorado Inside Postgame this week. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.